my name is Beck and welcome to my February wrap-up of all the things that I read and maybe didn't read in February. I'll explain in a minute. I have 8 things to talk about, and the first one on this list is The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is Time of Contempt. I think it's book 4 technically in the series, if you include the first 2 short stories, and this one primarily follows a bunch of different characters, and there is a lot more political seeds being planted, I suppose. This one didn't engage me as much as the previous book in the series. I ended up giving Blood of Elves, which is the other book, about 4 stars, and then this really pivoted and went downhill. And I've got a spoiler, I guess, review on my GOODREADS, so I'll link that below if you want to know specifics, but I can't get into them here because it spoils the ending of this. But essentially, it's just the way that women are treated in this book. I didn't love it at all, and I didn't like the way that the characters were particularly developed. I wish there was more engaging content regarding the world building and the magic, but the way this narrative shifted, it seems like that's going to develop more in the future. So even though I only gave this about a 2 or 2.5 stars, I will continue the series with the next book to see if I like where it's going, because I'm primarily reading for Ciri and Geralt. Ciri is the lost princess of Sintra and Geralt is the Witcher, the gruff guy who's like the father, the mentor of Ciri. I like the mentor, the gruff mentor, and the apprentice relationship, but at the moment they're in different trajectories, and so I'm not really seeing that relationship develop very well. And there's also Yennefer, the witch and the sorceress. She seems interesting too, but again, there's not really much developing her either. So this story really fell down for me when it came to the characterization, the pace as well. I think because this is a translated work, even though it was around 300 pages, it still took me a long time to get through this, considering how short it was. So I'm just a bit disappointed with this series at the moment. It can kind of go and sit in the naughty corner, but I will be continuing with the next book just to see, because I really want to like this series and I liked the book before this. So I hope this doesn't go the same way as The Wheel of Time. I don't want to DNF the series. I'm going to try one more book. At least these are, a third of one of the Wheel of Time books, so doing that seems a little bit more viable. And then I pivoted out of fantasy completely, and I read 2 books by Talia Hibbert. And I only have one of those with me because I lent the other one to a friend. So Get a Life, Chloe Brown is the one I want to talk about first. I gave it 5 stars and I adored it. I talked about it in a reading vlog as well. If you want to see that, I'll link it for you. Chloe Brown is about, obviously, Chloe Brown. She's one of the 3 Brown sisters. She is experiencing a life dilemma. She has like an epiphany of sorts when she's in a cafe and she narrowly avoids getting hit by a car, and she's like, well, my life can end any day, so maybe I should step out of my comfort zone, make a list and see what I can do. So I really loved this book. I loved the characterization. I was always expecting to have some kind of secondhand embarrassment when it came to a romance book, because whenever they do stupid stuff in the narrative, I always get embarrassed on their behalf. But this book actually didn't really have that as much, and I love the way that, without getting into spoilers, the tensions in the story came from the past trauma of the characters rather than because one of the characters deliberately lied to one of the other ones or manipulated them emotionally or something like that. I love the way that there was no cheating, that there was communication, and that there was an address when it came to past trauma, and people wanted to go to therapy and they wanted to encourage their best healthy selves. And so I love the way that that message was conveyed in this book, as well as the fact that Chloe Brown has fibromyalgia, a chronic illness, and I don't have that myself, so I can't speak to the sincerity of it, but it feels like it was pretty well researched and it felt realistic to me as an outsider reading it. So I really loved the way that that was portrayed. I loved Chloe's voice as a character. She was very snarky and funny, and at first it seemed a little bit dramatic and over the top, but you just got used to it. It's a romance book. It's not supposed to be completely realistic. I really liked it, and I obviously continued on to read, take a hint, Dani Brown. Dani Brown as a character I didn't love as much as Chloe Brown, but I still gave this one a 5 stars. It was just a smaller 5 stars than Get a Life, Chloe Brown, but they're still basically on the same level. So Dani Brown is a lecturer. She's a literary lecturer at uni, and she ends up fake dating a guy named Zafir, and he is a security guard for the building that she works in. And one day there is a drill, I think a fire drill. There's not an actual fire, but she gets stuck in an elevator because of this drill, and he comes and basically saves her. And so he walks out of the building holding her in his arms, and everyone is filming them and taking photos of them, and they're like, oh, we ship it, we love it. And so Zafir is really pivoting on all of this social media attention because he's running this small business that hasn't really got much traction. And so because of that social media buzz, now his business is starting to get traction. And so Dani is roped into this kind of fake dating relationship and she doesn't like commitment. So again, like the first book, I love how this portrays characters who are in their late 20s, early 30s, and they've been in serious relationships before. But the way that those relationships have turned out have not been in positive ways and they have negatively impacted these individuals. And so again, the trauma and the tension in the story came from the characters' backstories and maybe reacting poorly to situations because of their past history as a personal stance rather than, oh, I'm going to lie to this person to make myself feel better kind of thing. So I really love this one as well. And I actually have the next book right here, but I haven't read it yet. That's going to be on my March TBR, even though it wasn't in my TBR video. The bookstore just happened to get the stock in. So I'm anticipating that I'm going to give Eve Brown a 5 stars too, if the first two are anything to go by. Obviously, I love these. They were sexy, they were steamy, they were very emotional, and they had a decent plot as well. They were very character driven, but they had overarching goals and development, which I really like. I don't know why I sat on the sidelines for so long because these are worth the hype. And now linking back to what I said at the beginning of this video, where I didn't read books, is I DNF'd The Humans by Matt Haig. I got 6 pages into this and decided that the writing style and the tone was just not my vibe at all. This was a story that is told from an alien inhabiting a human's body who learns what it means to be human and how we connect to everybody and what it means to be. And that premise sounded like it would be really deep and reflective and emotional to me. And that's why I ultimately wanted to try this, because I've heard Matt Haig praised and praised on BookTube and BookTwitter and Bookstagram. And I was like, you know what? I got to get me some of that. And so I did. And now I've decided not to read it because the way that this was told, it was very telling and it was just very obvious. On page 6, there was one line that I was interested in, and then beyond that, not really. And I was like, if this is going to be the tone that the whole book is told to me in, I'm not going to enjoy it. And so instead of just stretching out my misery and giving this a 2 or 3 stars, and that might be generous, I'm not sure. Instead of doing that, I'm just going to DNF it and then someone else can enjoy the book instead because I'll donate it. So unfortunately I DNF this. Maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but it's just really not my thing. Next up, I finished Evershaw by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 3.1 in the Skyward Flight series. Always a mouthful to say. Ultimately, I gave this one a 3.5 stars. The novellas for this series have just felt lackluster to me. They felt more like a money-grabbing exercise by extending this series out rather than condensing them and making them lush and worthwhile in the actual novels. What I've felt going through this series, because I'm keeping this spoiler-free, I have a separate spoiler video for this novella specifically. I'm keeping this spoiler-free and general because obviously it's book 3.1 in a series. It comes after Cytonic as well. So it's just a book series that I felt has deviated a lot from what it set up at the beginning. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I liked specific things about the first book that have become more and more diluted through the series. So yes, I will finish it, but no, I'm not really loving it as much as the first book. So I did reread the first 2 books in the series. I'm not going to reread them again, and I'm not going to reread Cytonic or the novellas again. They're just enjoyable, but they're not amazing, and I found Skyward amazing because to get Spencer, who is a character that is very abrasive at the beginning, to get her from abrasive and frustrating to the point to do a 180 where the reader actually respects and loves her by the end is a massive feat. And going from that experience to these novellas, it's felt, like I said, diluted, but the characterization has just not been as good. And I'm not entirely sure why. I don't think it's necessarily the collaboration. I think it's just Sanderson's direction with the series. He seems to be prioritizing at the moment writing the Lost Metal, which is the last Mistborn book in Era 2, and then also drafting the next Stormlight book, as well as drafting Defiant, which is the last book in this series. So it seems like he's trying to just get this series out of the way and have a friend help him out on the novellas and then promote his friend who's also a writer. So I can kind of see the drive behind the series, but I know that he's got other things in progress and they're of his more major works. So it seems kind of just like a stand-in, and that's it. So it was okay, but I don't usually give Brandon Sanderson about 3.5 stars, and I usually give him at least a 4, if not higher. So it was just a little bit disappointing, not bad, just not great. And then I read a book that I was really hoping that I would like, and it turned out that I really enjoyed it, and that is Cemetery Boys. This is by Aidan Thomas, and this follows a trans boy named Yadriel. And Yadriel is from a very traditional Latinx family, and this family kind of have an ongoing generational family secret where they can talk to spirits and commune with spirits of the dead, and they can heal those who are dying. So there are magics that are linked to just women and to just men, but Yadriel's like, well, I'm a trans man, so I'm going to have the male magic. And so he's pushing to do his initiation ceremony, but ultimately he's traditionally being denied that, and so he goes ahead with it anyway and accidentally summons a spirit of a boy. And so there is this whole link to how this boy died and convincing his family that he's like, hey, I need to be recognized. So I love the way that all of those themes were handled in here. I love how Yadriel had a small support network, and I love how the magic transpired in this work as well. I really liked the writing style. I really liked the characters, and at sometimes it felt like the pace was lagging a little bit, but that didn't really bother me because I was more interested in the characters. So I like how everyone played off in here. Yes, I did see a few things coming, but you kind of do because things get inevitable. So I didn't mind, because when those inevitable things happened, the onflow of what happened afterwards is what I was more interested in. So it came to a point that I could see, and then it did something new, which I enjoyed. So I gave this a 4. If you can read it, do. It's a lovely young adult book, and it's queer as well, so definitely pick it up. But then I surprised myself because I thought that this would take me a long time to read based on my reading history from last year. So I've been reading significantly faster, and at the time of filming this, I read about 11 books this year, and I barely read 11 books in a few months last year. So I'm doing well. I'm pretty happy. The book that I read is the second Mistborn book in Era 1, and that's The Well of Ascension. I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. The beginning felt a little bit more tedious to me because I'd read it before. This was a reread for me. And so when it came to reacquainting you with the characters and where they were after the events of the first book, and then developing more of the world building and the lore and the reasoning behind certain events and actions, I was like, I know all this already. So that's why it felt tedious. I guess tedious is a bit of a negative word. It just felt like more effort for me to pay attention, because I was like, come on, get to the action stuff, because I remembered the setup. So I did like it though. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. There were some moments in here though that you could tell were written by a religious Mormon man, just in terms of, gender and femininity and being very binary. But I expected that going into this work, and I think Sanderson has definitely grown with his newer series in Stormlight. So that's just because I'm looking with a new lens at an older work. Some things I can put aside. It depends on where your line is. Anyway, I really love the trajectory of Vin in this story. I love the other side characters too, and I plan on making a separate video of this because I can't talk about this in a spoiler-free way because it directly correlates to what has happened just before in the Final Empire. So all you need to know is that there is an impending war, and there are characters who are questioning their own identities and where they stand, and also their alliances with each other and what comes next. I loved the way the magic system was conveyed in here. There were some amazing cinematic moments as well. Brandon Sanderson just knows how to write a cinematic moment. If you want to get into Mistborn 2, it's a very simplistic writing style, and so it's very easy to just dive into this world, which is probably part of the reason that I managed to read all of this so quickly. It didn't take me very long, and I plan on reading The Hero of Ages next month. So I think that I can do that based on how fast I read the first 2. 5 stars, don't want to talk about it anymore, otherwise I'll spoil stuff, so I'm going to put it on the shelf now. And then I listened to another audiobook, and that is Autobiography by Christina Lauren. These are dual authors going under the pen name Christina Lauren, and the book is about a boy named Tanner, and Tanner is a bisexual boy who is going to his last year of high school. I think it's high school, but in America all of the years and stuff really confuse me. Anyway, he's on the cusp of finishing school and then going to college. Hopefully that clears it up for you because I don't exactly remember the terms. But he's living, I think, in Salt Lake City, which is a very highly populated Mormon area, and his mother used to be a Mormon but is not anymore. So Tanner has come out to his family. They all know he's bisexual. They're all very supportive, but he hasn't come out to his community or to anybody at school or even his best friend. And then one day in class, he runs into this boy named Sebastian. And Sebastian is the kind of person who he just decides to fall for. He doesn't have any say in the matter. As soon as Sebastian walks in and smiles at him, he's like, I love him. Essentially, that's what it is. And you think maybe that the way that Sebastian reacts, the feelings are reciprocated. So this deals with a potential relationship that gets built within a Mormon society where queerness is obviously demonized. And so I loved the way that Tanner had his own support network. I love how there were different ways of discussing and expressing things, and I'm being very vague specifically because I don't want to give away different beats in the story. But essentially Tanner is in this class and Sebastian has done this class before, and Sebastian wrote a novel, and in this class you are supposed to write a book. And so to help Tanner write his book, Sebastian is assigned as his mentor. So really they are getting together with goals to write this book or to help edit and write this book for Tanner's class, but it escalates beyond that. And I love the development and the discussion in this book. I liked Tanner's voice. At times though, I felt that the writing was a little bit too quick in describing what was going on, because sometimes I'd get a little bit lost, and then the ending felt like it wrapped up really quickly when I wanted a lot more detail. So it felt like it was very drawn out in the first 2/3, which was a good thing because I liked all the detail. And then the last little bit just kind of wrapped up real quick. So I wish it wrapped up a little bit slower so that I got a little bit more development of different ripple effects. But aside from that, I really enjoyed it and I gave it a 4 stars. And then lastly, I am currently reading an audiobook because I just finished Autobiography. The book I'm reading is Daughter of the Deep by Rick Riordan, and this is a different book written by the same author as the Percy Jackson series. This is essentially a magical school book, but it's set separately from the Percy Jackson universe. So the academy is called the Harding Pencroft Academy, and the main character's name is Anna, and she is attending because she wants to become a marine biologist or study in the world of marine biology, and each different category of study at this school is classed as a different animal. So I think she's a dolphin because she specializes in communications and language, which I thought was pretty cool. At the beginning of the story, we're just getting introduced to her, getting introduced to, I guess, what the classes and specifications are like, where this school is and how small it is, because there's about 150, 200 students. And then there's the inciting action. And I don't want to spoil that because that's what hooked me. So that has just occurred and now we're getting the fallout of that, and tensions are on the rise. I keep expecting the Greek gods to just come out of the sky and be like, you have a power, you have a power, and you have a power. But I don't think it's going down that road. I think it's more kind of like if you put Alex Rider and Percy Jackson in a book and took out some of the magic and just reduced them to everyday capabilities, that's what it would be like. So I've only got 11% into this so far, but I'm enjoying myself. The audiobook at times can get a little bit much because it's got musical interludes or musical backings sometimes to when the narrator is reading, and that frustrates me because it takes my attention away from the actual narration. But aside from that, that's just my little quirk. I'm enjoying it, and I'm assuming it's going to be a 3, 3.5, maybe 4 stars, depending on how connected to the characters I get. So overall, I think I had a pretty great reading month for February, aside from DNFing the humans. So if you've read any of these books, or if you have anything else to say, come and chat to me down in the comments below. Thank you so much again for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.